What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with a preview for Week 13 of the NFL season. Coming down the stretch here, we are all out of buys as teams are going to try to make the playoff push. Going to be some interesting things happening around the league, especially for the teams that are in the playoff race and teams that are out of it, how they're going to react to those situations. If you've never seen this video series before, I'm just going to roll through position by position. I'm going to do the research here with you, talk about some of the most interesting players who jump off the screen at me as I go through my research process and use my tools. These are all tools that I've created on dfsondemand.com. So let's not waste any more time and let's get right into Week 13. All right, so we're here on the cheat sheet and I've got my quarterbacks listed here. And right off the bat, we haven't seen too much of this the last couple of weeks. We have one quarterback projected pretty significantly over the rest of the field here. So Carson Wentz coming in with a 31, nearly 32-point projection, and then Tom Brady and Russell Wilson 6 and 8 points behind that. So that's a pretty significant gap. So let's look a little bit deeper at Carson Wentz. As a Philadelphia sports fan, I'm fairly comfortable with what we are about to get into right now, but just so you guys can see this, Carson Wentz, if there wasn't a guy named maybe like Tom Brady in the league, he would be your MVP, or could definitely be your MVP, right? I mean, and look at some of these fantasy games. And actually, I can probably show you a better tool here for these purposes. All right, so here's Carson Wentz. Has not scored less than 18 DraftKings points since week 5 and has only been held under 18 twice this year. So not only is he a very consistent quarterback, which makes me willing to roster him in all formats, he's also flashing the upside, right? So 31 points, 32 points, 25, 25. So he is, and notice those are all at home. He's like 2.5 points better at home. Where are they playing this game at? Oh, it's at Seattle. Okay. So we don't get that little home field advantage, and they have to go play in Seattle for a young player, which is a little bit concerning. So let me say this about Carson Wentz. I love the guy. He makes a lot of really good decisions. This is going to be a really tough place to play, but that doesn't get me off of him because of this Seattle defense. And we can look at this real quick. Let's look at Seattle against quarterbacks. And, okay, so it's been a lot of feast or famine, but what I don't think these numbers take into account is the fact that it's basically, this defense is decimated, right? Like the injuries are piling up. Cam Chancellor's out, Richard Sherman's done for the year. This is not that vaunted Seattle defense that we have seen in other years, and I think they're kind of at the bottom right now. So these numbers might not indicate that for this entire season. So I think there are concerns about Carson Wentz that might drive me off playing him in cash games. So I liked his consistency, which he's the type of player I'd like in cash games, but maybe not this week. I think maybe this week he's relegated strictly to GPPs, but hard to argue with this pretty significant projection that's coming in this week. Tom Brady and Russell Wilson, kind of know what we're getting ourselves into there. Let's look a little bit deeper at Blaine Gabbert. So, he just pops up, and we'll just do the Arizona quarterback situation so you can see this. Right, so here's the quarterbacks for Arizona this year. Of course, it was Carson Palmer the first, 6.5 weeks. Then he gets hurt, and Drew Stanton comes in. And then for the last 2 weeks, it's been the Blaine Gabbert show. And, he's throwing the ball a ton, which is what you're going to get with a Bruce Arians offense. They're going to throw the ball a lot. And he's been pretty good, right? He's thrown 5 touchdowns over the course of the last 2 weeks. He's scored 18 and 21 DraftKings points. I mean, he's not showing out like, he's probably not going to score you 30 fantasy points, but the guy's $4,700. Again, I am tempering expectations just a little bit because they are going to be playing LA this week, which is a really tough defense, but Arizona's at home. So this might be an opportunity for Blaine Gabbert again. If he goes out and scores you 18 fantasy points, you're probably pretty stoked at $4,700. If he gets you in the 20s, you're really thrilled. I don't think that's a particularly bad option. And then let's see if anybody jumps off the trends here. So this is just my little who's hot chart that we can look through to see who else might be interesting. So we talked about Carson Wentz. He's on the right side of this. Who else have we not talked about recently? We talk about these guys kind of a lot. Jacoby Brissett, Jared Goff we've talked about. Let's shorten the time frame a little bit, see if we can get a little more volatility. Here's Blaine Gabbert finally showing up. Oh, Big Ben. Okay, so has he bounced back or what? What's his price tag this week? $6,300 against Cincinnati. Let's go look at Cincinnati against quarterbacks. Let's just see what's going on here. Deshaun Kaiser puts up 20. Brock Osweiler puts up 15, Marcus Mariota 15, Blake Bortles 16, Jacoby Brissett 16, and then Big Ben played them in week 7. That is about like the easiest run of quarterbacks you could get, and they didn't really stop anybody. Not saying much about this Cincinnati defense, and Big Ben, I want to look at his game logs because remember like week 6, everyone was saying, oh man, like, is he washed up? Should he retire? He's been pretty good since then. So here we go. So this was kind of the bottom, right? Week 5, puts up 12 points in week 6. Then he gets Cincinnati and the streak kind of gets going. So if we just kind of eliminate some of these games, I just want, what do I want? Week 7 here? Yeah. All right, so since week 7, he's averaging 23 DraftKings points. For the season, he's averaging 18. So he's 5 points better kind of in this second half of the year ever since he got to play Cincinnati. And you know the weapons he has. The last 2 weeks have been awesome. He was 6,800 last week. Oh, he's 63 because that was the Monday night game, right? Okay, so here's what I think happened, right? So Big Ben gets his new price tag of $6,300 before he goes out and drops a big number and gets against Green Bay. So that's what's going on here. So he is probably $500 to $700 undervalued in my opinion, and trending in the right direction against a defense that hasn't shown much against some of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and now you get one of the hottest quarterbacks in the league. So pretty interested to see how that's going to go. And that's also the Monday night game, right? Yeah, I was going to say, okay, Monday night. So back-to-back Monday night games. So he doesn't even get the short week. Nice. All right, running backs. Let's see. Okay, I have not looked at these projections yet. So Todd Gurley, the number 1 projected running back, even with Le'Veon Bell on here. So okay, then the rest of these names are kind of what we would expect, right? It's the Saints running backs. It's Leonard Fournette. Christian McCaffrey's pretty high. Let's look at Todd Gurley a little bit. Probably haven't talked about him in a couple of weeks. We've been kind of on and off, hot and cold with LA recently, but let's see. And I'm assuming it's going to be this big matchup with Arizona. Let's look at Arizona defense against running backs. Yeah. Okay. So the last couple weeks have not been particularly good. Both Houston running backs put up big numbers. Carlos Hyde put up 21. Okay, Gurley, the last time he faced Arizona, put up 28. So this is starting to make a little bit more sense on why he is the highest projected running back of the week for me. There was somebody else what did I read a stat about? It might have been in standard leagues, but I read something like Alvin Kamara is running back 2 despite having, like 150 less touches than Le'Veon Bell, which is absolutely incredible. The guy just finds the end zone constantly. He's willing to break off a big play. I love him, right? I but it's kind of like, I'd be lying to you if it wasn't the same conversation that we had about Kareem Hunt 4 or 5 weeks into the season, where we said, how sustainable are these big runs? How sustainable is him scoring all these touchdowns? The bubble kind of burst on Kareem Hunt. Now you're kind of worried about the same thing. So long term, I love Alvin Kamara. I just wonder week to week, if he doesn't get those big plays, how is that going to hurt? And now he's priced at what? $8,400. Second highest priced running back on the slate. I always felt like Mark Ingram, is the safer back, with Kamara being the more explosive guy who can go out and score you 40 DraftKings points, or, if he doesn't snap off a couple of runs, he kind of puts you in a bind. But the going's good. Business is good for Alvin Kamara. I'm just slightly less optimistic than most, which I think is usually my mindset around these types of situations. And if you want to hear about that more in depth, we talk about it a lot with Kareem Hunt earlier in the season. Okay, so Todd Gurley's there. Talked about him. Let's see who else pops out. Lamar Miller, we've talked about a bit. I want to see what his workload is like. I guess we should get off. There we go. Get off quarterbacks. Okay. Kind of all over the place, right? So he's carried 21 and 22 times in the last 4 weeks, but also 10 and 11, which is a little bit concerning. As with most running backs in the league, sorry, I'm blocking it. As with most running backs in the league, if they get 20 carries, you're probably going to get pretty good dividends from their fantasy performance. So it's really just a matter of, is he going to get the carries this week? So Houston has Tennessee. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pause real quick. I'm going to pull up the Vegas odds so I can take a peek at that. So hang on one sec. Yeah, so Houston is a 7-point dog this week against Tennessee. So I'm not sure that particularly bodes well for someone like Lamar Miller, which was a bit of a concern. Actually, I just pulled all the NBA odds. And I have those in some of the tools now. I'm going to look towards getting all that stuff in here for the NFL and for other sports. So ideally, we'll be able to see, okay, when Lamar Miller and the Texans are favorites, they put up X number of points, or if there's any correlation between being an underdog or a favorite. So I'll have that up as soon as I can. Here's running backs. Alvin Kamara obviously jumping off the page. This David Johnson. I always usually fix this before I publish it, but there's 2 David Johnsons in the league, and my data source is very confused by that. So sorry. I'll get rid of it. You know what? Let's talk Minnesota running backs for a second here. I have Latavius Murray pulled up. Both Murray and McKinnon are getting significant touches. I don't know what their price is this week. Let's see if we can find them. All right, here's McKinnon, 51. And then let's see what Latavius might be. Here we go. He's only 51 and 52. This projection is probably a little off because it might be taking in more season long as opposed to recent results for Murray, but both of them at 51 and 52 is kind of interesting. I think they both get a big enough workload. What's the line on that game? Minnesota is a 3-point dog in a game with 47.5 points from Vegas, which is like the second or third highest total on the slate. So that's pretty good. I wouldn't mind either of these guys, quite honestly. I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you it's probably a little bit of a guessing game with both of them right now. But I think they're both running hard. They're both seeing 14 or 15 carries a week on an offense and a team that's winning, which is usually a pretty good sign, especially at this point in the year. They might ride the hot hand a little bit more than than we would like. But again, $51 to $5,200 is about as good a value as you're going to find in week 13. Outside of like maybe like Joe Mixon, or like, are you really going to try to guess at one of these New England running backs? I think that's a fool's errand. So I don't mind either of those Minnesota guys. And then where is let me see here. Jamal Williams, $4,700. So we're going to have to keep an eye on the injury report. Ty Montgomery has been just battling this rib injury for a while. Here we go. So, that projection takes into account all these other weeks. So kind of just look at the last, since Ty Montgomery went down. No worse than 8 fantasy points, which is obviously nothing special, but 11, 13.5, and then the big game for 29.5 last week on Monday Night Football. Again, his price probably doesn't move that much because the pricing was already out before he had that big game. He's like the only guy there, right? Like, keep an eye on the injury report. If he's going to see 20 carries, like, there's not many running backs in the league that are going to see 20 carries this week. So a guy who is only $4,700 against the Tampa Bay defense, like, sure, absolutely. So a few big benefits from that pricing coming out before that Monday night game, allows us to get access to these types of players. Wide receivers. Let's do it. Wide receivers. Projections. DeAndre gets a ton of targets. Good matchup. Julio Jones, no surprise. Antonio Brown, no surprise. Robert Woods, is he going to play this week? I'll look up Robert Woods while we're doing this. Larry Fitz, interesting. AJ Green. I mean, this is kind of what we would expect, right? There's not a ton of value here. If Robert Woods plays at $5,900, let's see what the latest is. Doesn't really look like it, does it? Couple of weeks. That was 9 days ago. So I don't think he's going to play this week. If he would, I'd be pretty interested. Not really much else here, right? I mean, this is kind of fair. This is what we would expect. These are all the names we continue to talk about. That pricing's pretty handy. Oh, Robbie Anderson. He's caught, 5 touchdowns or 5 straight weeks worth of touchdowns. Yeah, there's Thielen. There's Hopkins for you. Antonio Brown kind of on another planet. Marvin. Let's shrink the range up even a little bit more, see if we can get a couple more outliers. No, it's a pretty well priced position. So hold on, let's go back and see what Robbie Anderson's price is going to be. Yeah, $6,300. A reeling Kansas City team heading to New York. Let's look at Robbie Anderson. Yeah, this is a really good run here. So, 25, 14, 18.5, 35 DraftKings points. Wow, more good games than not this year, especially lately. Robbie Anderson solidifying himself as a legit receiving option for the New York Jets. Another game at home. That's not bad. It's a pretty good price on him. And then sometimes I like to just look at something like this. Like, I'm just going to sort this by targets. And then I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on receiving touchdowns. So DeAndre Hopkins, most targeted receiver in the league, also has caught 9 touchdowns. Not really a surprise. This jumps out, right? Julio Jones, 1 receiving touchdown. Is that right? Last week? Is that his first one? Is that right? Stand by. No, so before this video goes live, I'll update this. I think I had a couple of week 12 teams that got hung up in my feed. So he had 2 touchdowns last week, but before that he only had 1. But what I'm looking for is, like, touchdowns are very random. They're very hard to predict. So guys who are seeing an exorbitant amount of them, which is kind of what we talked about with Kareem Hunt at the beginning of the year, tend to regress to the mean. Guys who aren't scoring a ton, you can kind of expect them to, at some point, again, get back to the mean and find the end zone. Maybe that's what we're about to see for Julio Jones. Guys who have not found the end zone but are still having, large yardage points, heavily targeted weeks. Those are the types of players that I actually think have more upside, just because they haven't reached that potential of those touchdowns yet, which is what we talked about with LaShawn McCoy probably week 5 or 6. I don't think he had found the end zone yet. So those are the types of players that I'm looking for, just because touchdowns can be pretty random. All right, I'm just going to sort by salary one last time. It's a pretty fair position. We talked about Devontae Adams being Brett Hundley's go-to guy. Cooper Kupp, I suppose, with Robert Woods being out, is going to be heavily targeted by Jared Goff. So those would be some of the values. That Woods probably goes away because he's not going to play. And then that's probably it here. Pretty fair. And then we'll wrap it up with tight ends. So go by projections again here. Okay, Ricky Seals-Jones. So what did he do? Catch two touchdowns last week, or caught a touchdown? Let's see if I can find him. Yeah, so here's the guy, 2 weeks, 20 DraftKings points and 17 DraftKings points, and he's still, what, $3,000, $3,200. So there's your value play. No one will overlook that. I mean, I think he's going to be very popular, but you can either punt this position that we've talked about for 13 weeks, how terrible the tight end position is. Last week actually wasn't bad, but results-wise, I mean. But now you've got a guy who's $3,200 who, has at least some pretty significant upside in this offense with Blaine Gabbert at the helm. So, no surprise that those two have played 2 weeks together and both are prospering. So you could either go and punt this tight end position, or you could lock up 2 of them. You could go get, Seals-Jones and Gronk, or Kelsey, Jack Doyle. What do we have on Jack Doyle? Yeah, a lot more volatile, right? Would never want to plug this guy in a cash game because he might drop you 2.9 DraftKings points. But other than that, some legit upside. We've talked about Jacoby Brissett being able to do things out of the pocket all year long. I'm, pretty optimistic on Brissett long term. There's the guy, right? There's the beneficiary, but he's going to be much too volatile to plug into cash games. Cameron Brate has fell off the face of the earth since Jameis Winston got hurt. That's a shame. So really, you almost get a free space here with Seals-Jones if you want to lock him in and go with a double tight end, or just take the value at $3,200. So kind of a free play there, but you will not be alone. I'll have plenty of them, and I'm sure so will the rest of the industry. So let me know what you're going to do there. Are you going to roster 2 tight ends, or are you going to just try to load up on some other position? That's it for week 13. Let me know what you think about that. Tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. Talk to you guys soon, and good luck.